The Galactic Council had spent centuries dismissing humanity. They called Earth a third-rate world, a civilization too young, too reckless, too insignificant to matter in the grand scheme of things. They mocked humanity's struggles, scoffed at their conflicts, and barred them from the most powerful alliances in the known universe. But now the Council was afraid. Their fleets were in ruins, their armies shattered, and their defenses broken. The unstoppable horror they had arrogantly believed they could handle alone had finally forced them to acknowledge the one species they had always deemed beneath them. The distress call arrived in the middle of the Terran Republic's High Command meeting. Every high-ranking officer and strategist on Earth sat in silence as the message played, the normally proud voice of the Grand Speaker of the Galactic Council reduced to a desperate, pleading whisper. "Terrans, if you receive this transmission, please respond. We require your aid." General Elias Vance leaned forward in his seat, studying the flickering hologram of the Grand Speaker's haggard face. The once proud Ilarian diplomat, known for his long-winded speeches about galactic unity, now looked utterly defeated. His ceremonial robes were stained, his posture slumped, his eyes filled with something the Council had never admitted to feeling before, terror. "Play it again," Vance ordered. The transmission repeated, but this time, static-laced screams echoed in the background. Explosions. The unmistakable sound of hulls breaking apart in the vacuum of space. It was clear. The Council's homeworld was burning. For a long moment, the room remained silent. Fleet Admiral Reyna Caldwell, one of the most decorated officers in Terran history, scoffed. "They ignored us, insulted us, kept us locked out of every major decision. And now they're begging?" "They had their chance," muttered Commodore Lien Wu. "They wanted nothing to do with us. Let them burn." Vance tapped his fingers against the polished surface of the war table. The room waited for his verdict. "Let them burn?" He exhaled slowly. We should. But the question isn't whether we help them. The question is, who is powerful enough to bring the Council to its knees? No one spoke. The answer was obvious. The enemy that now ravaged the core worlds of the Council was the Vraxian swarm. For centuries, the Vraxians had been a distant nightmare, an insectoid race from the void beyond the known galaxy. They did not negotiate. They did not conquer. They consumed. Worlds did not fall to them. Worlds disappeared. If the Vraxians had finally broken through the Council's defenses, then it wasn't just the aliens who had mocked humanity that were in danger. The entire galaxy was. "We need more information," Vance said at last. "How long until our nearest outpost can get eyes on the Council's core worlds?" 20 hours at maximum burn, a tactical officer replied. Vance nodded. "Send a recon fleet. I want full battlefield intelligence before we make a decision." "And if the Council is already lost?" Admiral Caldwell asked. Vance's expression darkened. "Then humanity will do what we always do." He looked at his officers, the most hardened, battle-worn warriors Earth had to offer. "We will adapt. We will fight. And when we are done, the galaxy will never doubt us again." 20 hours later. The first images arrived, and the silence in the war room was deafening. The Galactic Council's homeworld, Prime Alaris, was a graveyard. The orbital stations that had once stood as a testament to their power were now nothing but burning wreckage. Council warships, some of the largest and most advanced vessels in the known universe, floated lifelessly in the void. On the planet itself, massive swarms of Vraxian warforms tore through cities, leaving only husks in their wake. They didn't just kill. They harvested. Every organic being, every Council race, was either dead or worse. "Their defenses didn't even slow the swarm down," murmured a strategist. "It's worse than that," said Caldwell, her voice grim. "The Council had defenses. They had fleets. They had armies. But the Vraxians?" She gestured at the screen. "They were waiting for them. They anticipated their strategies. It was an ambush from the start." Vance narrowed his eyes. "You're saying they had inside information?" "More than that." Caldwell zoomed in on a cluster of wreckage, highlighting what remained of a Council battleship. "Sir, this ship wasn't destroyed by the Vraxians. It was hacked. Its own systems turned against it." The room tensed. Vance exhaled sharply. The Council wasn't just defeated. They were betrayed. An uneasy murmur spread through the officers. "If the Vraxians have infiltrators, we can't trust anyone outside of our own forces," Lien Wu muttered. "No one." A chilling realization settled over them. This wasn't just a war. It was an extermination. And humanity might be the only ones left who could stop it. The decision. Hours passed in tense deliberation. The leaders of the Terran Republic argued, debated, and reviewed every tactical scenario. Some advocated full mobilization, others warned against reckless intervention. But in the end, the decision was unanimous. They would fight. Not to save the Council. Not out of loyalty to those who had shunned them. They would fight because the alternative was extinction. Within minutes, the Iron Shield Protocol was enacted. Thousands of warships powered up, their fusion drives burning bright as they prepared for the largest military operation in human history. Every battleship, every dreadnought, every soldier. Earth was no longer a forgotten, overlooked world. Humanity would march to war. And this time the galaxy would never look down on them again. The order had been given. Humanity was marching to war. Within hours, the Iron Shield Protocol had mobilized the Terran Republic's greatest fleet in history. Hundreds of warships burned through the void, their fusion engines igniting like newborn stars. From the colossal dreadnoughts of the Titan class, bristling with super-heavy railguns, to the Nemesis-class stealth frigates, designed for infiltration and electronic warfare, this was not a desperate counterattack. This was a declaration. The galaxy had dismissed humanity. Now they would witness them. Aboard the TRS Dauntless, the flagship of the fleet, Admiral Reyna Caldwell stood on the bridge, staring at the projected battlefield display. "Status on the recon units?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Scouting probes report multiple Vraxian hive ships in orbit over Prime Ilaris," her tactical officer responded. "They're still feeding on the wreckage, harvesting organic biomass. Estimated enemy fleet strength, 120 major vessels." A murmur spread through the bridge crew. Even the most battle-hardened officers tensed at the numbers. The Vraxians weren't just occupying the system, they were consuming it. Admiral Caldwell turned to General Vance, who stood beside her, arms crossed. "You said we needed to fight. What's the plan?" Vance didn't hesitate. "We don't charge in like the Council did. We don't fight their war." He zoomed in on the largest hive ship, a writhing organic construct nearly 10 kilometers long. "We hit them our way." Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "Go on. We target their command structure first. The swarm isn't mindless. It's a hive. Cut off the head and the body falls." Vance pointed to a smaller, heavily protected cluster of ships near the planet's northern hemisphere. "That's their alpha node. Our intelligence suggests these nodes act as communication relays, coordinating the swarm in real time." Caldwell saw it now. The Council had never identified these nodes. They had fought the swarm like a conventional enemy, throwing fleets at their ships without realizing the Vraxians didn't operate on standard logistics. But humanity was different. Humanity adapted. Caldwell nodded. "If we eliminate the alpha node, the swarm loses cohesion." "Exactly," Vance confirmed. "We break their coordination first. Then we rip them apart." The battle begins. Orders were given. The fleet adjusted formation. Strike Group Omega, a squadron of Nemesis-class stealth frigates, slipped ahead, their hulls coated in the latest gravitic countermeasures, rendering them almost invisible to enemy scanners. Their mission: destroy the alpha node. As they moved into position, the main Terran fleet burned hard toward the Vraxian hive ships, broadcasting wide-spectrum signals, baiting the enemy into combat. The swarm took it. The first wave of Vraxian warforms erupted from the wreckage, hundreds of biomechanical horrors moving in perfect unison, charging the Terran fleet with eerie precision. Caldwell stood firm as the first impacts shook the Dauntless. "All forward batteries, fire at will." The void lit up. Massive railguns thundered, sending tungsten slugs the size of city buses tearing through chitinous hulls. Plasma torpedoes roared forward, their trails burning bright against the darkness. Humanity's firepower was brutal. The Vraxians were used to biological warfare, acidic weapons, virus bombs, swarming tactics. They weren't ready for kinetic hellfire. Enemy ships shattered as high-velocity rounds ripped through their formations. Their regenerative armor, so effective against energy weapons, was useless against the sheer kinetic force of Terran artillery. But they kept coming. "Brace!" Caldwell shouted as a Vraxian dreadform, a massive living siege beast, slammed into the side of a Terran cruiser, tearing through its hull with scythe-like limbs. The ship detonated, taking the monster with it. It didn't matter. The Terrans fought harder. And then, Strike Group Omega reached the Alpha Node. Commander Elias Markov of the TRS Phantom watched the grotesque structure loom before them. The Alpha Node was alive, a pulsating biomechanical mass, surrounded by biocruisers acting as living turrets. "Weapons hot," Markov whispered. "Let's end this." The first volley hit hard. Missiles streaked through the void, slamming into the node's organic shell. The creature screamed, a telepathic wail that reverberated across every Terran comm channel. Then the Vraxians reacted. The entire enemy fleet twitched as if confused. Their coordination lagged. Swarms that had been attacking in perfect formation suddenly hesitated. The swarm was unraveling. Markov grinned. We've got them. One final shot. A barrage of high-yield fusion warheads struck the core of the node, and it ruptured. A shockwave rippled through the entire enemy fleet. The hive mind fractured. The swarm disoriented. It was the opening humanity needed. The turning point. Back on the Dauntless, Caldwell saw the moment the Vraxians hesitated. They're vulnerable, Vance said. Hit them now. The full force of the Terran fleet descended upon the crippled swarm. With their coordination shattered, the Vraxians fought like panicked animals instead of a singular, overwhelming force. Humanity pushed forward. Titan-class dreadnoughts unleashed their main batteries, cutting through hive ships like they were made of paper. Strike teams infiltrated enemy capital ships, planting charges and sabotaging their regenerative systems. AI-driven drones swarmed into battle, countering the biomechanical horrors with cold, ruthless efficiency. And then, the largest Vraxian vessel began to retreat. The swarm, the unstoppable enemy that had brought the Galactic Council to its knees, was fleeing. Caldwell exhaled sharply. We've won the battle. Vance shook his head. No. He pointed to the retreating ships. Not yet. The chase begins. The Vraxians were falling back, but not towards deep space. They were running toward something. A transmission from Strike Group Omega came in. Admiral, we're picking up a massive energy signature on the far side of the system. It's not Vraxian. Caldwell frowned. Explain. Markov's voice came through the comms, tense. It's a Council distress beacon. Someone or something survived. A long silence followed. Then Vance spoke. Set course, he said. We're not done yet. The bridge of the TRS Dauntless was eerily silent as the reality of the situation settled in. A Council distress beacon. Vance's jaw was tight as he studied the energy signature on the holodisplay. Are we sure it's not a trap? Markov's voice crackled over the comms. Negative. It's old tech, Council encryption, decades out of date. If the Vraxians were faking it, they'd use something more convincing. Admiral Caldwell exhaled, her gaze locked onto the retreating enemy fleet. All right. Send the recon wing ahead. We need to know what we're walking into. Moments later, 3 Raven-class scouts burned toward the signal, their engines running cold to avoid detection. The main fleet followed at a cautious distance, weapons primed. But as they neared the source, the readings grew stranger. The beacon wasn't coming from a derelict ship. It was coming from a structure. A massive, lifeless station, partially embedded within an asteroid at the system's edge. Its exterior was scarred and broken, as if it had barely survived whatever battle had taken place decades ago. And that's when the Vraxians changed course. They're heading for the station, Caldwell muttered. Why? Vance's gut twisted. Only one way to find out. The boarding team. Minutes later, Strike Team Echo was en route, led by Commander Elias Markov himself. Their dropship weaved through the wreckage as it approached the station. The closer they got, the worse it looked. The hull was riddled with acid burns and blast craters. But despite the devastation, the beacon pulsed on. As the docking clamps latched onto an airlock, Markov turned to his squad. Keep your eyes open, he said. Something survived here and we need to know why. The doors groaned open. Weapons raised, the team pushed forward, their boots clanking against metal floors coated in dust and dried blood. The corridors were silent, but something felt off. A few steps in, one of his men froze. Commander. Markov followed the soldier's gaze to the wall. His breath hitched. It was covered in claw marks. Deep, jagged gouges, as if something had tried to tear its way through solid metal. And beneath the claw marks, barely visible under layers of grime, was a message, carved in shaky galactic standard. Do not wake it. Silence fell over the team. Markov's grip on his rifle tightened. Stay alert. Move forward. They pushed deeper into the station, sweeping through abandoned quarters, ruined control rooms, and the remnants of an ancient battle. Skeletons of old Council soldiers lay slumped against walls, their armor corroded, weapons long since drained of power. And yet, the beacon remained active. They reached what looked like a command center, and then the doors creaked open by themselves. Inside was a single survivor. The last witness. At first, Markov thought it was a corpse. The figure was slumped in a chair, wrapped in a ragged, outdated council officer's uniform. Their skin was almost translucent, their breathing shallow. But as the team approached, they stirred. And then their eyes snapped open. Who? The voice was barely a whisper, raw and strained. Markov crouched down. Commander Elias Markov, Terran Republic. Who are you? The figure blinked as if trying to process the words. Captain. Dave R. A cough racked their frail body. Galactic Council. Second Fleet. Markov's mind raced. The Second Fleet had disappeared over 20 years ago. You've been here the whole time? Devar's expression twisted into something almost like fear. We tried to contain it. We thought we could stop it before it spread. But his voice cracked. They never left. And now they know you're here. Alarms blared. Markov's comm earpiece exploded with chatter. Commander, we've got incoming. The horror awakes. Outside, the Vraxians were no longer retreating. They were swarming toward the station, their once disorganized assault now coordinated, as if something had reconnected their minds. On the Dauntless, Caldwell slammed her fist against the console. What the hell is happening? Vance's face was grim. I think I know. He pointed at the station's deepest level, where a massive containment chamber was suddenly surging with energy. A single word flashed across every Terran sensor system. Containment breached. Then the screaming began. Not from the station. From the Vraxians. Caldwell and Vance watched in stunned horror as the swarm convulsed. Ships and creatures alike writhing in space as if something had turned on them. Something far worse than humanity. And then, it emerged. A shadow twisted out of the station, peeling away from the asteroid like it had been sleeping inside it. At first, it had no true form, just a mass of shifting void darker than space itself. Then it looked at them. A single, abyssal eye opened, gazing upon the battlefield with something beyond hatred. The Vraxians screamed in unison. Their entire fleet collapsed into chaos, turning not against the humans, but against themselves. The swarm was fleeing. Vance's hands clenched. My God, what did the council lock away here? Davar, still gasping on the station floor, forced out one last whisper. You don't understand. It doesn't kill to conquer. It kills to feed. The final decision. The dauntless bridge fell into silence as the thing in the dark shifted, and the battlefield turned into a slaughterhouse. Vraxian ships ripped each other apart, their bodies contorting as if their minds had been seized by something older, something hungrier. And yet the entity had not moved. It was waiting. Caldwell turned to Vance. If the swarm's afraid of it, shouldn't we be too? Vance didn't answer. Because deep down he already knew. If the council buried this thing, if they chose to die rather than let it escape, then humanity had just made a terrible mistake. Markov's voice crackled through the comms. Admiral, we need immediate extraction. Now. Caldwell exhaled sharply. Get them out of there. And prepare the fleet for emergency withdrawal. Vance stared at the shadow outside. Was watching them now. And for the first time since the war began. Humanity wasn't sure if they were the apex predator anymore. The TRS Dauntless vibrated as its engines roared to full power, the fleet executing a hard retreat. On every screen, chaos unfolded. The Vraxians were no longer a unified force. They had become prey, turning their weapons on one another, their once perfect hive mind shattering as if an unseen force had sunk its claws into their very essence. It was feeding. Admiral Caldwell clenched her fists. How much time until Markov's team is on board? 2 minutes max, a bridge officer shouted. But whatever that thing is, it's watching us. Vance's eyes flickered to the viewport. The shifting mass of darkness had begun to move, slow and deliberate, as if it were deciding what to do next. We need to get out of here now, Vance urged. But Caldwell shook her head. Not yet. We don't leave our people behind. A tremor rolled through the ship as the containment station ruptured, enormous pieces of debris scattering like broken bones. The darkness flowed around them, its form undefined, until a single needle-thin tendril extended toward a damaged Vraxian warship. The warship withered in seconds. Its hull collapsed inward, as if the very essence of the ship and its crew had been devoured. A high-pitched shriek, alien, primal, rang through the comms before the ship imploded into nothingness. The dauntless crew stared in stunned horror. Caldwell's voice was tight. No more delays. The second Markov is aboard, Admiral. New contact. Caldwell whirled around. What now? The sensor officer's face had gone pale. It's the Council. The Council's last resort. Through the debris field, A council war fleet emerged, sleek, unblemished ships, their hulls shimmering with advanced shielding technology. At their center was a dreadnought-class warship, easily rivaling the Dauntless in size. Caldwell's lips curled in disgust. The damn cowards show up now? Vance shook his head. This isn't a rescue mission. They're here to cover their mistake. A moment later, a cold, emotionless voice crackled over the comms. Human vessel, this is Supreme Commander Halric of the Galactic Council. You are ordered to disengage immediately. This sector is now under Council jurisdiction. Caldwell's temper flared. The hell it is. You buried this thing and now it's loose. You think we're just going to let you? This is not a discussion. Halric's voice was razor-sharp. We are deploying containment measures. If you remain in the system, you will be terminated. On the view screen, the Council Dreadnought's main cannon charged. The unholy choice. Markov's team finally reached the hangar, their boots pounding against the metal as the dropship lifted off. The second they docked, Caldwell didn't wait. Full fleet retreat. Get us out of here. But Vance's voice cut through the noise. We have a bigger problem. He pointed at the Void Wraith, now shifting toward the Council fleet. The Council had no idea what they were dealing with. Vance turned to Caldwell. We could leave right now. Let them clean up their mess. Markov, still catching his breath, shook his head. No. If they fail, if that thing spreads, how long before it reaches another system? How long before it reaches us? Silence. Then Caldwell made her choice. She turned to the weapons officer. Target the anomaly. Fire everything we have. Hell unleashed. The Dauntless' forward railguns fired first. Hypersonic projectiles slammed into the entity, but they didn't hit metal or flesh. They hit nothingness. Energy weapons followed, lancing through the void, only for the beams to vanish. And then, it turned toward them. A wave of cold rolled through the ship, the very air growing thinner, as if something was pulling the life from the space around them. Caldwell's breath came sharp. Get us out of range. Before she could finish, the Council Dreadnought fired. A supercharged antimatter warhead erupted from its cannons, burning through space toward the anomaly. And this time the entity reacted. It screamed. Reality itself warped, the battlefield twisting as the entity shifted, not moving but rearranging itself. The warhead vanished. The Dreadnought's shields flickered. Then, the entire Council ship began to wither. Like the Vraxian warship before, the Dreadnought collapsed in on itself, its energy being devoured, its very existence erased. In a blink, the Council's flagship was gone. The remaining Council ships fled in terror. The final gambit. Caldwell's knuckles were white. This thing doesn't just kill. It unravels reality itself. Markov exhaled. So how the hell do we stop it? Vance was already working on a solution. His fingers flew over his console. I have an idea. The Council's containment systems are still operational in the wreckage. If we overload them, we might be able to trap it again. Caldwell gave a sharp nod. Do it. As the Dauntless maneuvered through the debris field, Vance activated the ancient Council failsafes. Energy conduits flared to life, ancient technology crackling with stored power. The entity realized too late. As it surged toward them, the old containment system triggered. A pulse of raw energy erupted outward. The Void Wraith screeched, its form shattering like glass in zero gravity. It wasn't destroyed, but it was being pulled back. Reality reasserted itself. The anomaly collapsed inward, folding in on itself until nothing remained but cold, dead silence. Then the beacon went dark. The aftermath. The Dauntless and its fleet limped away, battered but victorious. The Vraxians were broken. The Council was disgraced. And humanity had proven, once again, that when the galaxy called them weak, they would fight anyway. Markov sat in silence, staring at the fading wreckage. Think we'll ever know what that thing really was? Vance shook his head. I don't want to. Caldwell exhaled, turning toward the crew. This war isn't over. But today we survived. She glanced one last time at the blackened battlefield. And deep down she knew. This wasn't the last time humanity would have to clean up the Council's mess. End of story.